Scribal errors. Do we know the types of errors scribes make? Yes, we do. Here's one. Genesis chapter 10, verse 4. What's the difference between that letter and that letter? First of all, can you see that there's a difference? What's the difference? Does everybody see the little bump on the end of that one? That's a tittle. Does anybody remember a jot and tittle? That's a tittle. This is a D. This is an R. Do you think the scribes ever confused D and R? Did you see how close those are? Let me give you an example. This guy's name is Dodanim. You got them all memorized from Genesis chapter 10 with all those names. The guy's name is Dodanim. But if you look in some of your Bibles, it won't say Dodanim, it will say Rodanim. Do you see that the R and D have been confused? So was his name Dodo or was his name Rodo? Okay? And the problem is the letter looks so similar that they confuse letters like that. Okay? The D and the R get confused. Now we know that's a problem, so can we correct for that? Yes, we can. Comparing manuscripts, you expect that. Here's another one. Let me just do this to you in English. Sometimes they spoke manuscripts so that what's the advantage of doing an oral manuscript? Like I would be up here reading, in the beginning was the Word, or in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Copy this down. What's the advantage? From one manuscript I could produce in this class, how many? 100. You see the advantage of doing it orally? But what's the problem orally? Here's the problem orally. Write down the word for me orally, the word there. What's the problem? You got T-H-E-R-E. You got T-H-I-E-R or E-I-R. How many of you have typed it? Okay, I-E-R. Okay, and how many of you have got T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E? Their book. Okay, or they are here. Okay, now let me just do Psalm 100 as an example of that. In the King James Version of Psalm 100, it'll say, "Make a joyful noise to the Lord. Come before His presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, He is God. It is He that hath made us, and lo anachnu, and not we ourselves." It is He that has made us, and not we ourselves. Does anybody remember hearing that? It is He that has made us, and not we ourselves. Lo anachnu. That's the King James. If you look in your NIV and most modern translations, you'll see it's like this. "Make a joyful noise to the Lord. Come before His presence." Okay. "Know ye that the Lord, He is God. It is He that hath made us, and we, lo anachnu." It is He that hath made us, and we are His. Is that very different than "not we ourselves," and we are His? You know how those are pronounced? And "not we ourselves," lo anachnu. You know how "and we are His" is pronounced? Lo anachnu. What's the difference? Lo anachnu, lo anachnu. Tell me which one's which one. You can't. Yeah, lo anachnu. He said it right. Okay, it's the same thing. You know what I'm saying? It's lo anachnu. But it can be taken as "not we ourselves." That's the way the King James translates it. And "we are His" is the way most modern translations, because we understand more poetry. Okay, other errors, metathesis. How many of you have typed this word? Are your fingers used to doing IE? Your fingers are used to doing IE. What's the benefit of Word? Word flips them. Have you ever had that? And it flips them and like that. So that's beneficial and stuff. So I recommend Microsoft Word. But anyways, this is called metathesis. When you switch the order of letters, you know what I'm saying? When you switch letters, that's called metathesis. By the way, if you ever read that in a manuscript, would you immediately know what that should be? If you ever read that in a manuscript, you know what that should be. It doesn't fake anybody out. Okay, so here's one. In the early Greek manuscripts, they were all written in capital letters with no spaces between the words. Do you like having spaces between the words? Tell me what that says. This is, you guys read English. Christ is what? Yeah, you guys are a bunch of pagans, man. This is beautiful. This is Christ is now here. Okay, do you see what the problem is when you don't have spaces between words? Do you see the problem when you don't have spaces between words? By the way, I should say this. Well, let me just hit. Okay, here's another one. This is called homoeutelyuton. I just like it because it's kind of a cool word. Homo means what? Same. Telyuton means ending. Same ending. You guys all know this. Same ending. Have you ever read across the page and you come across a word here and it's repeated down about 3 lines here and your eye skips down the page because you come across down? Let me take you to Jesus doing the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the guy was beat up and and there was a priest and he comes up to him and he passes by on the other side. And then there's a Levite. He comes up to this poor guy who's beat up and he passes by on the other side. And then there's another person. He comes up and he sees and he passes by on the other side. What's the problem? Pass by on the other side, pass by on the other side, pass by on the other side. In certain manuscripts, what did the scribe do? Did his eye jump down the page and he skipped one of the guys because his eye jumped down the page? Now, is that the kind of, have you ever read like that and you jump down the page? That's called homoeuteleton. Same ending, you jump down the page. Now here's another way to do it, dittography. Dittography means, have you ever typed something and you type it twice and then you realize you did the same thing twice and I get mad at myself and it's like, oh gee, I can't believe I just typed that and stuff and so then I erase it. Okay, dittography means it was written twice but it should have been written once. Haplography means it should have been written twice but they only had it once. So dittography and haplography are the opposite. Dittography means it was written twice, should have been written once. Haplography means it was written once and it should have been written twice. So, you do that kind of stuff, these kind of errors. Here's another one, harmonizing corruptions. This comes from the book of Job, chapter 3. In Job chapter 3, it goes like this. What's happening to Job? Is Job get the tar beat out of him? Okay, so Job's getting the tar beat out of him, and his wife comes up in chapter 3. Her kids are dead, everything's been blown up, stuff. And she comes to her husband, and I'm quoting literally from the Hebrew now. I'm going to quote you literally the Hebrew. Tell me what's wrong. In the Hebrew, it says this. Job's wife comes up and says, Job's got all boils on him and stuff like that. Job, bless God and die. I'm quoting, this is a quote direct from the Hebrew. It's Baruch, means bless. Bless God and die. Now, when you read that coming from Job's wife, it isn't real clear what she really said. Did she say, bless God and die? You say, yes, she was a very pious woman. Oh, no. When she comes to Job and all stuff, she's saying what? Curse God and die. Question, what was one of the problems? Did the scribes not want to write curse God? Did the scribes like to write curse God? Scribes did not like to write that. They put bless God there instead. Now, by the way, anybody reading that text, you know that it should be curse God and die. Let me say that again. Anybody reading that text, you know that it should be curse God and die. Anybody reading that knows that. So what happens is the readers flip that. The scribes didn't like to write this, so they put bless God and died and stuff. So that's called harmonizing corruptions. They just didn't like writing curse God and die. Now here's conflation. Conflation is an interesting one. Some manuscripts, this comes from the book of Revelation, I believe, or Acts, maybe it's Acts. It says the Church of God. So you got 50 manuscripts that say Church of God, Church of God, Church of God. Then you got 50 other manuscripts that say Church of the Lord, the Church of the Lord. Now you're a later scribe, you got 50 manuscripts that say Church of God, you got 50 manuscripts that say Church of the Lord. Which one are you going to copy? Yeah, so what do? By the way, let me ask, what would you do? If you had one that says Church of the Lord, you had one the Church of God, what would you do? They combine it and they say the Church of the Lord God. So later manuscripts have this Church of the Lord. Now the point with conflation is the text has a tendency to what? Can you see that the text has a tendency to grow? Because of this conflation thing. Yeah, you had a question there? Okay. The conflation, the text has a tendency to grow because of this conflation problem. Why didn't God preserve His Word perfectly? Could He have preserved it perfectly? Is there any manuscripts that's perfect? Is there any manuscript that's perfect? We don't know because all we've got is manuscripts that come from 100 years afterwards. And we've got to compare manuscript with manuscript. We don't know even if we had it. Do the manuscripts have errors? Yes, they do. Some of the scribes, do you realize in the margin, some of the scribes put, this is the honest truth. He says, it is so cold in here that my ink is freezing up on me. Now question, do you write well when you are freezing like that? No. And so these scribes had really hard conditions and things, and so I don't fault the scribes. They did the best they could. They didn't have spell check and word and that kind of thing. But let's go back. Why didn't God preserve it? The suggestion is, if God had preserved His perfect word like the 10 Commandments and left it in a box, what would people do to that box? What would they do to those 10 Commandments? They'd end up worshiping the relic. Do human beings make relics out of that kind of stuff? They would worship the relic rather than the God behind, the Ten Commandments. And so I think that he purposely had his word lost to say, I want you worshiping me, not some text. I want you worshiping me. And so therefore the text is lost, there's no relic. Is any major doctrine affected by all these scribal errors and things? Is any major doctrine really affected? The answer is no. No major doctrine is really affected.